All right, let's talk about a thinker who basically took a sledgehammer to all the things we just accept as normal. We are diving into the world of the French philosopher and historian Michel Foucault. So let's just start with a pretty mind-bending question, because this is really at the heart of everything Foucault talked about. What if all these big categories we use, to sort out the world and even ourselves, what if they aren't solid, timeless truths? What if they're actually just products of a messy, random, historical process? And yeah, that was pretty much his life's mission. He completely flipped the script on philosophy. Instead of asking what's universally true for all time, he asked, hey, what about all this stuff we think is absolutely necessary right now that could have easily been totally different? In other words, what do we assume is permanent when it's really just an accident of history?
To pull this off, he had to become a kind of philosophical detective. He became the great questioner of our modern world.
This quote right here, it just perfectly captures his whole perspective. Foucault wasn't some downer saying everything is terrible. Not at all. His point was that any system, any institution, no matter how good its intentions are, has hidden dangers. And because of that, our job is to stay awake, to stay vigilant, and to constantly question the things around us. And to do this kind of investigative work, Foucault developed two really powerful tools for digging up the hidden rules that quietly run our lives.
His first tool is what he called archaeology. And you should think of it literally, like you're digging through the layers of the past. But instead of old pots, he was looking for the unspoken, unconscious rules, he called them epistemes, that decided what could even be considered knowledge in a specific era. These rules basically set the boundaries for what people could even think or say.
And his second tool was genealogy. So if archaeology shows us the rules of a time period, genealogy shows us how we got those rules. It's kind of like tracing the family tree of an idea. He'd look at our modern institutions, like prisons or hospitals, and showed that their history wasn't this beautiful straight line of progress. Nope, it was a messy, chaotic, accident-filled story full of power struggles.
And this brings us to probably his most famous work, where he uses these methods to totally pick apart the modern prison system. This is where you can really see how power secretly shapes us.
So Foucault noticed this huge shift. We went from, public torture, a big bloody spectacle attacking the body, to putting people away in prisons where the goal is to control the soul. Now, he argued this wasn't us becoming more humane. Not really. He said it was about finding a much more efficient, much quieter way to control people, to reform them into being good, productive citizens.
He said this new kind of disciplinary power relies on three clever techniques. First, constant observation, the idea that you're always being watched. Second, what he calls normalizing judgment. You're constantly being compared and ranked against some idea of normal. And third, the examination. Think about a school test or a medical chart. It combines the watching and the judging to create a file, a body of knowledge about you that makes you easier to manage.
And the result of all this? It's something he called the panoptic effect, named after this theoretical prison design where a guard can see every inmate, but the inmates never know if they're being watched at that exact moment. Foucault saw this as a giant metaphor for modern life. We start policing ourselves, right? We internalize that feeling of being watched until we become what he called docile bodies, well-behaved, useful, and easy to manage.
So this whole analysis led Foucault to a completely radical new way of thinking about power itself. For him, power isn't just something a king has or a government wields. It is literally everywhere.
So, get this. Power isn't just top-down, it's not just repressive, it's not always about saying, no, you can't do that. It's more like a network that runs through everything. And here's the most important part. It's productive. Power actually creates things. It creates our reality, it creates categories, it even creates our desires. But, and this is the hopeful part, he also said that wherever you find power, you will always find resistance.
He also came up with this idea of biopower. It sounds a little intimidating, but it's basically the shift from the old model of a king having the right to kill you to a new form of power where the state's main goal is to manage and optimize the life of the entire population. We're talking about things like public health statistics, city planning, the whole shebang of keeping a population healthy, productive, and under control.
And this leads to his most explosive idea, that power and knowledge are two sides of the same coin. You can't separate them. So fields like medicine or psychiatry don't just discover truths about who we are. They actually help create the very categories like sane and insane, normal and deviant that they use to define us. By creating knowledge about us, they gain power over us.
Okay, so all of this might sound a little bit bleak. I get it. But in his later work, Foucault turned to a much more empowering idea. He started asking, if power shapes us so much, how can we start to shape ourselves? How can we create our own rules?
He became fascinated with the ancient Greeks. He saw a huge difference between how we think about morality and how they thought about ethics. For us, morality is often about a rigid set of rules you have to obey. But for the Greeks, ethics was more of an art of living. It was a personal project. They weren't asking, what am I not allowed to do? They were asking, how can I create a beautiful, memorable life?
And he had a beautiful name for this, an aesthetics of existence. The idea is that yourself isn't some deep, hidden treasure you have to go find. The self is something you actively build. Your life can literally be a work of art that you yourself create through your choices and how you decide to live.
And that's what he leaves us with, this really powerful final question. If Foucault is right, if so much of what we think is natural about us is really just a product of history and power, well, that's actually incredibly freeing. It means we have the power to push back, to question, and maybe, just maybe, to invent completely new ways of being for ourselves. So the question is, what kind of life are you going to create?